Good morning and welcome to Conversations with Your Friendly Neighborhood Black Guys. I'm Keenan Mose.
I'm Kiyoshi Taylor, and this is Reverend Dr. Zandra L. Jordan. Today we'll be just calling her Dr. Jordan. She's a wonderful person. We are so ecstatic to have her here, especially in Women's History Month. She's another example of Black excellence. She is an ordained minister. She works at Stanford. She's a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, which is a powerful Black sorority, which is awesome. We're all for that out here. She worked with the AME Zion Church in Palo Alto, which is just up the road from me and Keenan, among a whole bunch of other things. She also she holds a BA in English from Spelman College and M.A.T in English from Brown University. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at a whole list of things you do, but I think people just want to hear us speak. So let's just get started.
I was reading through your bio before, and I'm like, oh my goodness. She's like, let me just show you what strong, independent Black women look like. Every kind of education. It made me so excited this morning. All these conversations have introduced us to some of the most amazing people we've met, and that includes you on this list. So we're very excited.
That's so kind. Thank you. I appreciate it.
So since you're a minister, the first thing I thought was, what was your calling? Like, what brought you down this whole path?
Yeah, I accepted the call to the gospel ministry while in my doctoral program at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. I was nearing completion of my program, actually, and I received the call. It was a pretty amazing experience that I have to say I wasn't entirely surprised by that it happened, but the way that it occurred certainly was surprising to me. I was emceeing a praise dance concert at my church, Second Baptist Church of Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is a predominantly Black congregation. And on the way to the service, I was riding with a friend, and there was a song playing on the radio where there was a little bit of speaking. It was a gospel song. And sometimes the artist, particularly if you have someone who is exhorting and there's a choir singing, but they're kind of talking in between, it can sound like a kind of preaching style. And I looked over at my friend and said, sometimes I think I'm going to do that. And we looked at one another and we just burst out laughing. And I said, no, I won't be doing anything like that. And then we go into the praise dance concert and it starts. And I introduce the first performers and have an experience of being exceedingly full, of feeling very full. And before I knew it, I just had a lot to say. And it became apparent to the pastor and the congregation that the Spirit was moving and something was happening there. And the pastor said very publicly, after I went on with that, introducing each act, and really was engaging in a kind of prophetic commentary after each performance, the pastor says to the congregation, I think I've got another daughter in the ministry on the way. And they just clap and cheer. And I'm like, what? No, what are you talking about? And so he pulls me aside during the intermission and encourages me to, really seek out what God is saying. Zandra, you can't hide your light under a bushel. And I was a little like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're throwing the scripture at me. And after that, had a week of prophetic dreams, a recurring dream of myself preaching. And I could not deny the call. And I was kind of like, okay, this is a lot. I'm ready for these dreams to stop. Let me go on and say yes, which I did. And the rest is kind of history. That was 2004. That
Wow.
was 2004. And so the tail end. And so by January 2005, I was delivering my initial sermon, as we say, in the Black church tradition. And that was it. Yeah.
Yeah, as someone who wears the cloth, like, how do you deal with the pressure? Because I know, second someone becomes, a minister, everyone looks at you to be perfect all the time, but yet you're human. So how do you deal with that?
That's a great question. People do sometimes have those expectations, but I have to remind myself also that we are human beings who are carrying out an invitation, a partnership with the Lord, but we don't stop being human in that process. And so I think it's just being real with people about the things you encounter in your own everyday life, and not putting yourself up on a pedestal, not allowing other people to do that, and choosing to be vulnerable, transparent, and say, hey, I've experienced something like what you have gone through. Let's talk about how we can together overcome that, or strategize together using our faith to get through those difficulties. So honesty, transparency, and avoiding that inclination that people sometimes have to elevate their religious leaders more than they should.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's very interesting to me, because, like, at the same time, we keep talking about the Black church. That's something that keeps coming up, and it's Black culture and Black liberation, Black freedom is very much entwined with God, the Lord, and Black church. And, and that raises a bunch of questions in my head, and you as a minister and as an educator at Stanford, some of those questions for me growing up was like, when I look at our history, it's why is God testing us, through slavery, through segregation, like why us, and also why are we able to keep such great faith? So why do you think is through all these trials and tribulation, why do you think that is with the Black spirit?
I think that the Black spirit certainly is one of overcoming. It's one that values that history of liberation, and we are here in all of the hues that we represent because we come from stock, we come from people who have, I don't mean stock in an animalistic kind of way. I mean that we come from an ancestry, a lineage of people who know what it means to travail and triumph. And so we have that in our DNA, in our blood, that we have gone through exceedingly oppressive, and still are going through exceedingly oppressive and trying times. And yet we continue, yet we are still here, right? And so a part of that, I think, enables us to continue in fighting for justice in the ways that we do. This certainly is not limited to those who have a Black faith tradition, but we do see through Black church, Black Christian faith traditions, that spirit that says, God loves me, God intends for me to be free and to live a life that is just as equitable and full of life and liberty as anyone else. And it's a godly design and mission to engage in works of liberation, that is a godly call. Why us? Listen, I think that we will have to be in glory, talking directly to the divine to understand that. It's such a difficult question to rationalize. I think for some people, because of how much people of African descent have been abused and misused and continue to be the target of abuse throughout the world. People of the darkest hues are always the most maligned, the most abused and oppressed. And I would say even especially so of women. So if you are a dark-skinned woman anywhere around the world, you can expect to encounter a great deal of hatred and discrimination. And that just holds true culture to culture because of colorism, because of colonialism, because of a wide array of social ills. And that's not to negate the difficulties that we see happening for Black and brown men either. But just noting that there are intersecting traumas. And so when we're talking about, when we look at both race and sexism and classism, all of those things compound for women of color of the darkest hues in ways that are systematically discriminatory. And so it's important that we can turn to our faith traditions as one of the ways that we combat these social ills. I believe that God is a God of justice, despite how much we have endured as a people over the centuries. One point that we must remember is that we have endured, we have survived, we are fighting our way still, and we insist that we are going to thrive. And so, we refuse, we refuse to be destroyed. And I think that's a part of the history that it's important for us to know and to celebrate as we continue to work for greater freedoms, because we certainly have not arrived.
As a minister, how do you teach these in your teachings? Do you throw Black history, or are you strictly scripture?
You know what? So perhaps I could use the this past year, the pandemic is one example. One of the things I do is lead an online Bible study. I really emerged when a student expressed interest, and I also heard from a faculty member. Both happened to be Black, and they were saying, what do we do during this time as we're trying to figure out this interplay between pandemic and oppression and protest and Black Lives Matter. And, we need a place to start really engaging with these ideas as people of faith. And so I felt very encouraged and called to start an online Bible study, and we meet weekly. And we began with a series on faith and justice, and really exploring that dynamic of justice fatigue, and how do we understand faith in the midst of wanting to see a world in which we all can live freely and we are not subject to the deadly whims of the state, that should be protecting us. And yet we see that Black and brown men and women and others are constantly repeatedly finding themselves in that situation where people are threatened by our presence and are very quick with a trigger or with other deadly means, right? Pressing one's knee into someone's neck who is already on the ground, right? Where does that come from? Or the systems that made it possible for officers to storm into a home under the cover of night, right? Wouldn't you think someone was breaking in? And the stories go on and on. So we certainly engaged in the story from that vantage point of recognizing that faith ought to speak to our lives. And it can't just be limited to the scriptures, because our faith is meant to be lived out. And if it is going to speak to our lives, then we've got to draw on the scriptures in ways that allows it to be in conversation with what people are experiencing daily. I think it's Reverend Dr. William Barber who I have heard say that there's something wrong. There's a problem with a faith that doesn't speak to the issues, the ills of the time, the things that people are actually encountering and living through. So I would say, yes, that comes up in our discussions, in our biblical discussions, where we're trying to understand those connections.
It's very interesting. And I definitely see how people turn to religion, especially Black people throughout the pandemic, throughout all the stuff that's gone over the past year, not only to kind of, get educated or kind of figure out what to do, but also in terms of finding community. And we've seen, I mean, been on national news where they talk about like Black churches where they're trying to get people to, get vaccinated or go to, learn about wearing masks. And you've seen that connection that you're just talking about between not just scripture being scripture, but that connection and the life that we're living. How do you work on building community through church?
Oh, wow. And, right now, a lot of what we're needing to do is rethink where and how community takes place, because a lot of churches, not all, but many have been restricted to the brick and mortar church. And what we have found out during this season of pandemic is that church is not, it's the people and anywhere we are. And so, regardless of those walls, we can continue to build community through the tools that are available to us. And so, there are many of them that we can access digitally, right? We're seeing churches have had to learn very quickly how to move their ministries online and reach their congregations, continue to minister and build community with their congregations through online means. And so, that's one of the things that the church where I am currently a part is doing. University AME Zion Church in Palo Alto, a historically Black church that has a very long in a predominantly white community, which is amazing in and of itself that it has survived and thrived for so long and is doing very impactful work in the community. The church, under the leadership of the pastor, Pastor Coloma Smith, is launching a digital campus. And they're doing that through Facebook, through a very savvy and technologically skillful approach to online ministry that is bringing in members, engaging its members from around the country, some international as well, and being sure that we are still able to engage in a worship experience that is dynamic, that is interactive, where you get to know people and you are engaging through the word still and feeling a part of the life of the community of the church. So there's outreach that's still occurring. There is Christian education that's still occurring, ministries for various age groups and demographics that is vital during this time when we know that many people have been shut in. Not all live with families, and we need those points of connection. And so, having a ministry that can move beyond the walls of the church, right, and reach people across the country in their rooms, wherever they are, and make them feel a part. Is especially needed at this time.
Yeah, one thing you just kind of answered a question I was about to ask, two of them actually, about having a church and EPA and how you keep that going, and also that you guys are staying modern. And so that made me start thinking like, well, there's this problem we see in this country where, one, a lot of churches are dying because they fail to adapt with the modern times. And not only that, but it's the ones that fail to do that tend to have this mindset that this country often gets stuck in, of unable to adapt, move forward, change with the times. And that, I think that ties into this messiness we have right now in Congress of politics and religion, and the inability to adapt, move forward, and create community. So what do you think of, I guess I know I just kind of threw a lot out there, but what do you think about like religion and politics really these days, and people's inability to really adapt and move forward and kind of bring all different communities together, as you seem to be doing?
I think one of the challenges that we have with religion and politics is that people tend stuck on very finite issues and don't look beyond those issues to really think about the larger matters. So they might say, I'm opposed to abortion. I am opposed to gay marriage. I'm just choosing two of the most controversial religious issues as examples. And then they assume that because their candidate who professes to be Christian or a particular religion and they are opposed to those things are God's choice. And they are going to make the best decisions for the country, that they are somehow more ethical and more suited to the role than other candidates. And that's such a dangerous assumption, where we really see often that an alignment with evangelical political points of view also tend to be aligned with political perspectives that have been very destructive to communities of color, communities that are lower income. And even if that impacts their own, they tend to not see it and still just go hard for those candidates because of a few issues that they claim to stand for, while not recognizing that their policies are actually being very detrimental to them and their families also. We've got to think beyond, we've got to look beyond what appear to be just those surface issues and really understand more about what candidates stand for and what the potential good that they can do for the greatest good, right, that they can do for the greatest number of people. So I think that we have a lot of growth to do as a country, that people really need to expand their thinking of what it means to be a person of faith in politics. And just because someone claims to be a Christian or they are for, they support your particular stance on certain issues doesn't automatically make them the right candidate, the best candidate, or even the God candidate or God's choice. So it's a complicated issue, Kiyoshi, but I mean, that's a little bit of what I think about it. I also think that God would have us to be politically minded. I think at the other end of the spectrum, we have people who think, well, that's just politics. I shouldn't have anything to do with that. Religion is not a part of that at all. And I just fundamentally disagree. I understand Jesus's life and ministry to be very political. And it was engaged in upturning a system that did not look kindly or favorably to that movement. It was a political work. And I also understand, as I've noted earlier, God to be a God of justice. And so that requires engaging in these systems that we are all a part of, that we live in, and working to ensure that they bring about freedom for everyone who is in need of it. And so, one of the things that we see through Jesus's ministry is championing the cause of the poor, the downtrodden, the overlooked, the marginalized. We see it again and again, those who were not in positions of high esteem or status. Jesus was working to really thwart those systems and expose injustices and people that Jesus was least expected to talk to touch, to engage with it anyway. Jesus was engaging. You know, he was ridiculed for wanting to spend time with those who were considered to be unworthy, and that really falls along lines of ethnicity or race and class, you know, during that time. Whereas the religious elite would have made very different choices than Jesus did. And so you know, as a person of faith, for me, part of what that tells me is that my faith walking must also be engaged in the political and social realities of the world that we live in. And we see that also through um, traditional movements through the Black church. We see it also through movements that are taking place that many Black women are engaging in through new ways of religious thought. So womanist thought, womanist theology, a social movement spearheaded by Black women is really working to center the God talk and experiences of Black women of faith who recognize that the historic Black church has been very patriarchal, and you know, traditionally has not affirmed the call of women in ministry, the voices of women, despite women making up the vast majority of traditional church membership. The leadership tends to be overwhelmingly male. And so we have, there is a very significant history and movement among Black women of faith, theologians who, being inspired by Alice Walker's term of womanism, and carrying that forward into a variety of fields, including and primarily theology, but not solely theology. It's being used in a number of fields and disciplines to really explore what happens when we center Black women's epistemologies. You know, if we free Black women, everybody can get free. Because in order for Black women to get free, you know, it's going to take a level of systemic change that would allow for everyone else to be free as well. And so, you know, I think it's work that matters. It matters to me in my work through the Hume Center for Writing and Speaking, which, you know, that's not a religious post. But I bring the wealth of my sensibilities to it, not in a desire to proselytize. We certainly at the university have students of a range of faith traditions, and some who don't have a faith tradition, you know, who may not believe in a divine power or source. You know, although that's something that is very important to me, and I, you know, hold to that experientially. So it's real to me in terms of what I have lived and what I value. And so, you know, I am an unashamed Christian. I believe in Jesus Christ. I have no qualms or problem with saying that. And I very much value my life of faith and ministry. And I also value bringing the ethic that undergirds my ministerial work to my professional work, which is to say that I believe that that writing and speaking, that the work that we do in engaging with others through those means of communication, that it should be ethical, and that there are ways that we can engage in that work that advances the cause of racial justice, that equips and enables people to have conversation with others outside and beyond their own groups of identification, and to do that in ways that builds community, that expands rather than shuts down conversation. So to me, we're always doing more than just working with someone on a simple assignment, because language is infused with identity. We can't escape it. It's already in the room when we come together for a tutorial to talk about, that paper or that speech or whatever it might be. And so it's in the room. Let's not avoid it. Let's talk. We can talk about this, and we can do
Oh
it in ways
man, we
that
love that.
better,
We
better
love that.
this better in the community. That's what we're doing. We're using language for the ways that it enables us all to get free, to be better people who know how to talk to others across difference.
I love that you said that, because we just had a linguist on like last week. So thanks for the plug. And also, while we're doing plugs, thank you, Ruth Starkman, once again for bringing us another amazing guest. I know Keenan, though, has a question about sororities and how you guys empower awesome Black women. So
yeah, well, before I get into that, I had one other thing too. You had brought up like if you free Black women, then you free everybody. And there's a term that I came up with a while ago for my mom, my sister. I use it for all my the Black women in my family and that I'm around. Is SIBWA, strong, independent Black woman. I do it in like embarrassing ways, just like yell at them when they're like working out, whatever. Like, come on, SIBWA, you got this. And at first they were like weird about it, and they absolutely love it now. And that definitely 100% applies to you as well. You are a SIBWA, and it's been awesome having you here to talk with us. So I'm about to graduate college, and all the fraternities and sororities at my school are kind of like just known as these party things. But then when I went and talked to my aunt, and she was in a Black sorority at Stanford, she was telling me like very different experiences. So I was just wondering like how being in a Black sorority kind of helped you find that community, and also how maybe that community helped together to make change and kind of grow.
That's a really excellent question. I think in the Black tradition, our sororities and fraternities are different from what we often see with other similar groups. The white fraternities and sororities, the experience tends to be a little different. So one thing for us is often we are, and this is one of the things that we talk about in my sorority, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, is that we don't consider it just something that you do in college, but this is something that spans our lifetime. And so we join with the intent to impact the world in which we live. And that's very intentional. And so we strive in our leadership, in our scholarship, in our sisterhood, so that we have a world-changing impact that results in the uplift of communities. So that is foundational for us. It's a core of what we do. And so it's not just about socializing. In fact, our socializing often is going to look like, okay, what's this community meeting we're about to go to where we need to advance, really elevate the conversation about this matter in our community, or how can we get engaged in, getting out the vote, or ensuring that everyone signs up for the census and understands the importance of that and the impact on it in our community. We recognize a need for college scholarships for students in our area. How can we raise funds and really create opportunity for young people who otherwise would not have it to go to school and get an education? We are trying to have a voice everywhere that we can to ensure that there are greater opportunities for those who need them the most. And so we do that. We're in the same ways that we see the historic Black church was the institution that helped to provide educational and political gains for the community. It was that space because they didn't have it anywhere else. And so, if you're not getting what you need out in the world, where we're going to work on greater access to literacy for our communities, we're going to work on economic empowerment for our communities. We're going to work on, political engagement and awareness. And so, in the same ways that the church valued doing that, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and other Black sororities and fraternities, definitely value that kind of political activism. And it's at the core of what we do. Yeah, we're going to socialize also, but at the core, the foundation really is service. Our engagement in the structures of our society so that we can change and improve society. And again, we recognize that those changes, the impact that we have, there is an effect, a kind of a ripple effect to other communities. When you recognize that you are often the most maligned, then the liberation that we're looking for is one that would be holistic for everyone. So that's a part of what we do, but we have such a rich and such a rich history of political engagement, and of healthcare and engagement in so many areas of educational improvement as well. It really spans the gamut. And we're not the only ones, but of course, I'm going to toot the horn of my sorority.
Of course,
And just say that, we were the first, listen, get it straight, to engage in political action. We were the first. And so if you look at, the women's suffrage movement, you're going to see Delta women as a part of that, right there at the forefront, engaging in that work. And we carry that forward to this day.
I love that. I love that. Thank you.
Well,
I've always wanted to know more about that and kind of have someone speak to it, because what you normally see about fraternities and sororities, and I feel like get dragged with it, is like, oh, it's just all these parties and stuff. And to see that strength of community and change and kind of having that avenue to have those conversations and be able to kind of inspire others to like, hey, let's do better together. Let's work on these things. I love that. So thank you.
Sure.
and as we talk about, more conversations, I thank you so much for being a part of our conversation. Conversations with your friendly neighborhood Black guys. We thank you so much for being here, Reverend Dr. Zandra L. Jordan. I guess the L stands for legend. I've been Kyoshi. This is the part where Keenan normally goes, and I've been Keenan.
And
we thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.